Divorce regret. I left my husband for the thrill and lost everything real. I used to think boredom was a crime. Not the kind that lands you behind bars, but the slow drip kind that kills marriages from the inside out. That's what I told myself anyway. For 15 years I was married to Daniel, the most dependable, predictable, maddeningly steady man I'd ever known. He packed my lunch for work every morning. He washed the cars every Saturday. He still ironed his shirts. Who irons anything anymore? We met in college. He was calm, analytical, the type of man who planned out his future on spreadsheets and actually followed through. I was the wild card, a journalism major who swore she'd be a travel writer and live in 20 countries before 30. But life had other plans. I got pregnant just after graduation, and we did the responsible thing. Daniel proposed over pizza in our first apartment. I cried because I was scared and said yes because I was more scared to say no. 15 years. A house, 2 kids, a golden retriever. I should have been happy. I was happy. Enough. But enough is a dangerous word when you're a woman who's convinced she's still supposed to be chasing something more. That's when I met Marcus. He wasn't like Daniel. He was 10 years younger, tattooed, a personal trainer with arms like movie posters and a smirk that made me forget how to breathe. I met him at the gym Daniel paid for. It started harmlessly enough, a flirtation, a compliment here and there. He called me trouble after I sarcastically corrected his form during a stretch. I laughed, a little too loudly. I wore tighter leggings the next week. Soon I was skipping dinner with Daniel and the kids to catch a late workout. I started needing space, something I'd never said once in our marriage. Daniel didn't ask questions. He just supported me, like always. Gave me space, gave me silence, and Marcus filled that silence with fire. We kissed in the backseat of his car one night after I told Daniel I was going to yoga. I didn't stop it. I didn't want to. That kiss was the beginning of the end. For the next 4 months, I lived a double life. The perfect wife at home and the thrill seeker in secret. I lied to my husband, I lied to my kids, I lied to myself. But it didn't feel wrong. It felt alive. I told myself I deserved it, that I'd sacrificed so much for everyone else, it was time to do something selfish. I didn't know it at the time, but I had already decided. My marriage was over. I just hadn't told Daniel yet. The night I asked for the divorce, he was making tacos. Tuesday, as always, I waited until the kids were upstairs. "Daniel," I said, and my voice cracked. He turned to me, smiling like he always did when he heard my voice. "What's up?" "I want a divorce." The look on his face will haunt me for the rest of my life. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, spatula in hand, like I'd just spoken another language. The hurt wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it was quiet, heavy, real. I told him I felt suffocated, that I'd lost myself, that I needed freedom. I didn't tell him about Marcus. I left the next day. The kids stayed with Daniel at first. I moved into a condo across town, sleek, sterile, cold. I told myself it was modern, a fresh start. Marcus stayed over that first weekend. We drank wine, he lit candles. We didn't even make it to the bedroom. It was passionate, exciting. But in the morning, he left before breakfast. No kiss, no coffee, no good morning. I told myself it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. Weeks passed, then months. The excitement dulled. Marcus started replying slower, making excuses, busy with clients, exhausted. "Let's do next week." He stopped calling me trouble. He started calling me intense. Eventually, he just stopped calling. I tried to act unbothered, bought new clothes, cut my hair, traveled, posted "look at me now" selfies that nobody liked, and told myself they were too intimidated to comment. But I couldn't shake it. The divorce regret. It hit me in waves. The first time was at a parent-teacher conference. Daniel walked in with the kids. Julia had her hair in a braid, the same way I used to do it. Except now he did it. He looked tired, but the kids looked safe and loved. After the conference, I tried to walk them to their car. Julia hesitated before hugging me. My son barely made eye contact. Daniel didn't say anything. He just nodded. The silence was unbearable. The second wave came the night I got the flu. Nobody was there to hold my hair back. Nobody made soup. Nobody picked up NyQuil. I lay on my bathroom floor, sweating and shaking, and realized I was completely alone. I called Daniel. He didn't pick up. I left a voicemail. "I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I don't know what I'm doing." He never responded. I started seeing a therapist. She didn't let me off the hook. She said I'd been chasing validation, not happiness. That I mistook attention for affection. That I'd traded security for adrenaline and now was mourning what I'd discarded. I cried for an hour straight. She was right. I'd love to say Daniel took me back. That there was a grand gesture, or some Hollywood redemption arc. But there wasn't. When I finally told him the truth about Marcus, he looked at me and said, "I would have forgiven you if you'd just been honest." That was the last real conversation we had. He's dating someone now. She's kind, pretty, teaches music to special needs kids. Julia adores her. My son calls her Miss Megan. He talks about her like I used to talk about myself, and I smile when he does. But it burns. That's the thing about divorce regret. It doesn't scream, it lingers. It shows up in the quiet moments, like when you cook dinner for one or fold laundry that only smells like you. It whispers to you in the silence between texts. It lives in the ache of knowing you were loved and left. And no matter how much therapy or travel or wine you drown it in, it never really leaves. You'd think losing the man who once kissed your stretch marks like they were art would be enough to trigger regret. But no, it was the smaller losses that broke me. Like the first time I went grocery shopping after the divorce and realized I didn't know what kind of cereal the kids liked anymore. Or the night I reached for Daniel in my sleep, only to clutch a cold, empty pillow. Divorce regret doesn't come in one big wave. It trickles in, quietly, cruelly, and in pieces that look harmless until they're stacked on top of each other. Marcus was gone. That was no surprise. He started flaking just weeks after I moved into my new apartment. First, he ghosted a dinner. Then he stopped staying over. Eventually, he blocked me altogether, and I had the pathetic honor of realizing I'd been replaced by a girl whose name I never even learned. He was never mine to begin with. He was a spark I tried to build a fire around. I spent too long convincing myself Daniel had been the problem. Boring, too routine, too grounded. In reality, I was the one who couldn't sit still long enough to appreciate what I had. I'd always been a storm. And Daniel was the man who built a home in my chaos, and I burned it down. The kids had started to adjust. They were spending more and more time with Daniel. At first, the custody agreement was 50-50, but gradually, they stopped asking to come to my apartment. Julia cried once when I picked her up. "I want to stay with Dad," she said, lip trembling. I tried not to show it, but I broke inside. "What's wrong with being with me?" She looked away. "It's just quieter there." And she was right. My place wasn't home. It was an apartment full of echo and anxiety, not bedtime stories and pancakes. They stopped calling it Mom's house. They called it the apartment. The final nail was my birthday. I was gone on a work trip. I didn't hear from my son at all. Julia texted me a simple, "Happy birthday, Mom," but I knew it was Daniel who reminded her. They spent the day at the park with Daniel's new girlfriend, Megan. She posted a photo online. It was the four of them on a picnic blanket. Megan was braiding Julia's hair. I stared at it for an hour. I'd spent the evening alone, half drunk on cheap wine, pretending to love the freedom I had once fantasized about. I told myself this was what independence looked like. But it felt more like exile. I'd wanted passion, adventure, something more. And now, on the one day meant to celebrate me, I had no one to celebrate with. That's when I said it out loud for the first time. I made a mistake. I went back to therapy. Dr. Willis didn't say "I told you so." She just looked at me like she'd been waiting for me to arrive at that sentence. We talked about self-sabotage, about how some people ruin the best things in their lives because they believe deep down they don't deserve them. I asked her if that's what I was doing when I left Daniel. She didn't hesitate. "Yes." I wrote Daniel a letter, not an email, a real letter, with my shaky handwriting and tear-smudged ink. I told him I was sorry. Not for leaving, because I knew he didn't want to hear that, but for lying, for betraying his trust, for turning the man who built a life with me into a stranger overnight. I told him I didn't expect forgiveness. I just wanted him to know that he had been a good husband, a great father, and I was the one who threw it away. I signed it, with regret. Always, Elise. He never wrote back. I wish I could say writing that letter fixed something, that it brought closure. But really, it just made the silence louder. I started visiting old places alone, restaurants we used to love, the bookstore we'd browse on Sundays, the park where we took the kids when they were babies. I wasn't trying to chase the past. I was trying to understand how I'd ever been foolish enough to walk away from it. Once, I saw Daniel at the coffee shop across town. He was sitting outside, smiling. Megan was across from him, holding his hand. She looked at him like I used to. Before I stopped looking. He didn't see me. I didn't say anything. I went home and cried for 2 hours. People talk about divorce regret like it's a moral lesson. Like once you feel it, you'll do the work, learn your lesson, and life will give you another shot. It doesn't. Sometimes you don't get redemption. Sometimes you just get perspective. Cruel, lonely clarity that comes too late to fix anything. About a year after the divorce, Julia had a piano recital. Daniel invited me, of course. He always tried to include me, even when I didn't deserve it. I sat in the back. Megan was in the front row with Daniel holding his hand. When Julia finished her piece, the crowd clapped. She smiled at him. I walked out before the next performer. I didn't want anyone to see me crying. In the parking lot, Daniel caught up to me. "You're leaving already?" he asked. I nodded. I didn't want to ruin anything. "You didn't." We stood there for a moment in silence. He looked different, lighter, like someone who had finally stopped holding their breath. "I got your letter," he said. My heart froze. "And?" He paused, then smiled, not cruelly, not bitterly, just sadly. "You're not the villain, Elise, but you're not the hero either." That night, I sat alone in my apartment and looked around. The walls were empty. My suitcase from a recent weekend trip was still unpacked. A takeout container sat half-eaten on the counter. There were no toys, no laundry piles, no laughter. It was the life I used to dream of. And it felt like punishment. I'm not writing this because I want sympathy. I'm writing it because there are women and men out there who think chasing the spark means you'll find joy. Sometimes the spark is a wildfire. And sometimes what you burn can't be rebuilt. If you're bored in your marriage, talk. If you feel unseen, scream. But don't light a match unless you're ready to live in the ashes. Divorce regret isn't poetic. It's not romantic. It doesn't come with violins and closure and healing Instagram posts. It's ugly. It's humiliating. It steals your sleep and your appetite and your identity. It makes you miss things you once took for granted, like being kissed on the forehead while you cook. Like watching someone love your kids so deeply it hurts. Like having a home that smells like family. Daniel and I aren't enemies. We're just two people with a history that once had a future. And I live with that every day. When you first leave your marriage, people assume you're either devastated or euphoric. The reality, most of the time, you're just numb. There's a silence that follows you everywhere, even in crowded places. A kind of hollowness that echoes every time you laugh a little too loud, or scroll through social media hoping for a distraction that doesn't come with guilt. It's been nearly 2 years since I left Daniel. Marcus is long gone, a forgotten chapter in a book I wish I'd never ever opened. Daniel and Megan are married now. Yes, married. Julia was the flower girl. Ethan gave a speech. I watched the wedding through a friend's shared Facebook photo album, because I wasn't invited, and honestly, I didn't expect to be. But it still hurt. Seeing my children in that ceremony smiling like they had a new family made the reality slam down hard. I hadn't just divorced Daniel, I'd divorced us. The family, the future, the Sunday pancakes, the Christmas traditions, the accidental laughter during homework time. They were all gone, and in their place I had this: a quiet apartment, a few faded photos, and a life I didn't recognize anymore. I tried dating. God, did I try? I went on 5 dates in 3 months. 2 ended in awkward handshakes. One man talked about his ex for 40 minutes. Another confessed he still lived with his mother. The 5th date was with a man named Greg. He was sweet, funny, and kind. He made reservations, held doors, paid for dinner. We went on 3 more dates after that. I even let myself feel something again. But when he kissed me goodnight after our 4th date, I didn't feel butterflies. I felt betrayal. Not his, mine. I couldn't stop comparing him to Daniel. His voice, his smell, even the way he tied his shoes. Greg wasn't Daniel. And I wasn't the woman I was before either. So I ended it. Told him he deserved someone who could show up fully. He appreciated my honesty. I cried for a week anyway. I threw myself into work after that. I started freelancing for small magazines, ghostwriting memoirs, editing whatever came my way. Anything to stay busy. At night, I read. A lot. I reread the books Daniel and I used to argue over. He was a sci-fi fan. I loved literary fiction. We used to trade books just to argue about them. I missed that, the teasing, the eye rolls, the comfort of being known. Now I dog-ear my own pages and argue with myself. Julia visited once. It was supposed to be a weekend, but she asked to go back home the next day. I'd tried. Made her favorite pancakes, rented movies, cleaned the apartment top to bottom. But I wasn't home anymore. I was just mom in a different place. She was polite, kind, but I saw it in her eyes, the discomfort, the sense of obligation. When I dropped her off, I hugged her and said, "I love you." She said thanks. I smiled until she closed the door. Then I sobbed so hard I couldn't drive for 15 minutes. Dr. Willis told me grief doesn't always come from death, that I was grieving a life I chose to end. Regret, she said, is just grief with a mirror. And she was right, again. I was grieving myself. The woman I used to be when I was someone's partner, someone's mother, someone's person. Now, I was just Elise, a woman with good taste in coffee, bad judgment in men, and a masterful self-sabotage. One day, Daniel called. Not for me, for Ethan. He'd been caught plagiarizing a paper. It was minor, but Daniel thought I should know. We talked for 11 minutes. It was the longest conversation we'd had in over a year. I asked him if he was happy. He paused, then said, "I'm at peace." Not happy. At peace. It made me want to scream. How did he get peace? And I got this ache in my chest every night. How did he find Megan, and I couldn't even finish a date? But I didn't say any of that. I just said, "I'm glad." And I meant it, sort of. Later that week, I went through my old boxes. I found the wedding album, dusty, still intact. Daniel and I on the beach, laughing, holding hands, toasting champagne. I stared at one photo, him kissing my forehead. He used to say, "This is where your brain lives. I have to kiss it goodnight." God, I miss that man. I miss being kissed there. Now I kiss my own damn forehead in the mirror some nights. It's not the same. There's no real ending to this story. Not yet. Just an empty apartment, a bookshelf full of memories, and a woman who finally understands the price of mistaking restlessness for unhappiness. The thrill faded, the regret stayed. And the silence, it never left. But maybe, just maybe, that's the lesson. That some losses can't be reversed, only remembered, only respected. And if there's any redemption in that, it's in knowing I won't make the same mistake again. Even if I have to learn to live with it forever.